and I was wearing t-shirts and shorts, and I never really had problems. And I picked up the top of the hive, and the bees made this sound that was just like, now it's like this ungodly sound of like, they were all like, zzz, like, and I was like, oh, something's not right. Happy. And by the time I thought to myself, oh, something's not right, my arms and legs were covered in bees stinging me.
Yeah.
And it ended up that the problem was they had lost their queen. And, you know, like anybody else, you lose your queen, you get a little cranky.
Today, we're talking about beekeeping. We got into our hives. People ask us about beekeeping all the time, and we've had sort of a varied experience with beekeeping. And we're going to be brutally honest with you. So I hope you're excited about that, about beekeeping and what it might look like. Unfortunately, as romantic as it sounds, and it is super fun, it is not a cheap hobby, and we'll talk about costs and stuff because that's one of the major questions.
It can also be really sad, but it can also be really exciting. It's like farming. It's kind of like farming.
That's all the good things in life, though.
Right.
Yeah. There's heartbreak, there's fun, and yeah.
If you've kept bees before, post in the comments wherever you are, just letting us know
what your experience is.
What your level of bees are, if you want to get started with bees, if you've had bees, you know somebody that had bees. Other
if you
than
just
us,
love honey, or you're like a honey connoisseur, we'd like to hear from you too, because I love all kinds of honey, and that is probably what enticed me. When I was a kid, I wanted to keep bees with my dad. I told him, I said, I want to keep bees, but we rented until I was like a teenager, and then I was too old. And anyways, I wanted to keep bees really bad when I was a kid because I loved honey. I loved all kinds of honey. When we would go to places, I want to get like one of those straws and taste all the different kinds of honey, and that still sticks around.
I never thought about keeping bees as a kid, because if I had, I would have done it. But
it's true, you would have.
Yeah.
Both me and my dad have kept bees since. I think a lot of people have kept and tried to keep bees, and there are some major difficulties that make it like, you know, maybe not your favorite hobby. So I'm going to pull up the questions so we can have them right in front of us. But let me tell you what our experience has been before we even get started. So we actually started keeping bees in the city when, let's see, it was probably 2000. I want to say 7 or 8. I was pregnant, so it was probably 2008. And we got our first hives, and we had this guy he was a local guy who does honey, and he was kind of in and involved in the beekeeping community pretty majorly. Hopefully our Facebook friends are finding us again. But he would come and he would help us a little bit. We did not start by going to a class, because there's some beekeeping classes that are available, usually through the extensions agency, locally, the Master Beekeeper class, right?
Yeah.
This is called.
Yeah.
And there's a local beekeepers association, which is really cool. And all of those things are a cool thing to be a part of. But usually what you'll find from the old timers is like, you learn as you go. So we are kind of the people who like just do it and figure it out as we go. So we didn't take a class first.
No.
Do you regret that?
Not at all.
No. So as soon as we get an idea, we kind of just jump in, which is to our demise sometimes, but this time it worked out. So we got 2 hives. We started with nukes that year, right?
We did. Yeah. I did it. I wanted to start because at the time I owned my own business, and I thought if I had hives that it would be something to make my mind, like I'd have to focus on that instead of
distract
myself. And that was part of it. Also, I really enjoy being in the midst of that kind of energy or chaos. I don't know what you call that.
Yeah. But I mean, we already had chickens and had a really extensive garden. So it was kind of just one of those things that fit in. And we had a small, less than a quarter acre property in the city near the mall. So, I mean, we were totally like, it was just a big experiment for fun.
Yeah.
And we were desperate for land at that time, which is a whole different story. But we were like, let's just make the most of what we've got. Let's pretend we have a farm.
Yeah.
And we really did have a farm. I mean,
we did. Yeah.
Because we made more honey there than we've ever made since. But it grew from there. So we had 2 hives, and they did really well there. We didn't have space for more than 2 hives. If you want to talk about getting bees in the city, we could talk about that. I didn't see any of those questions on the sheet, so I'm not going to talk about that right now. If you want to know, raise your hand maybe. But you can totally keep bees in the city. I mean, there's already bees in the city. So whether you're keeping a hive or not, there are some restrictions about how close they can be to your border or whatnot. But as long as your neighbors don't care, it doesn't really matter. So
well, and if you have a fence that causes the bees to fly up over the fence, then in every city, like Lacey said, every city is going to be different with
it's kind of like
what they require.
And neighborhoods have different rules and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But once we got to the place where the 2 hives, we would get 5 gallons of honey from those 2 hives, if not more, some years. We had them for 2 or 3 years. And then we decided that we had a friend who had some property, and he let us keep our bees on his property out in the country, which I will say was medium, right? What do you think about that?
Yeah.
I mean, we ended up having like 7 hives on somebody else's property, along with us and a friend. He had a few hives, and we would work together on dealing with them. And I don't know, it was good, but it was also like, checking on you kind of want to have an eye on them sort of all the time. It's a little bit like having any livestock. You want to be able to see what the activity looks like.
Well, and that's again, like commercial beekeepers will stick like thousands of hives out in a field and just leave them. But again, it goes back to like our whole mentality of what's proper animal husbandry, what's the proper way to treat an animal. And those hives are like designed for maximum amount of honey. And that's
when he
it.
says those hives, we had Langster hives. That's what we started with. It was with what most people think of when they think of hives.
It's the square white box
that stack on top of each other. And they are very efficient if you are trying to maximize the honey output. And that's what most people are trying to do.
But the compromise on that is just like any other animal, where you're compromising, in my opinion, the welfare of the animal for the product you're getting. So
it interferes with their biological kind of, I think it just manipulates it, I think, a little bit.
Well, like, so you give what's called a foundation. So if you've seen like those frames, they're like this size of beeswax that you pull out of those hives. Everyone is exactly the same. The cells on those are like pre-made so that the bees make them in a smaller size than bees traditionally make cells. But that's so that they can fit more in there and get more honey out, get them to produce more bees. So everything's like just a little bit tweaked to where it's
for max efficiency.
Yeah, and it's just a little bit off from bees. And on the flip side of that, I think it's probably an easy way to get started, like, because you get these kits with everything in them. I don't know. I mean, would you do that, or would you do top bar hive?
So we'll talk about top bar. Let's come back to that, because I do want to mention we did end up taking a beekeeping class. We went up to, there is a sanctuary in Floyd, Virginia called Spikenard Farms, and he has a honeybee sanctuary. And he's this fun German guy who teaches all these great classes. He's real into biodynamics and just like, how can we improve health of honeybees? And that's like, it's like a research center for that. So he's all different kinds of hives up there, and it's beautiful, and they plant all these wildflowers, and he does these trainings up there. So we did go up for a weekend and learn from him. And I think we both left there thinking, oh my goodness, we could be doing this in a much more like
holistic.
Yeah, holistic maybe is the right word, way, in a way that promotes the health of the honeybee. Because when you talk about all those little manipulations, and you talk about taking all the honey and putting sugar water in, or using chemical additives or whatever, that is going to diminish in the same way that interfering with sort of the human bodily function and cycles would interfere. So, we can't, like, I like to think about when we take a medication that stops our body from doing something. Well, yeah, ibuprofen is a good example, right? It stops the feeling of pain, but it taxes our liver. So there's always a consequence to manipulation in those formats. And so while I think a Langster hive is great and a really good place to start, like, if that's, you kind of want to bite off little chunks and just keep doing as much or as little as you feel comfortable with doing to improve. And I remember, I can't remember right now. Gunter Hawk.
Yeah.
He would say that the vitality of the bees is what we really want to encourage, the vitality. And this colony collapse disorder, he was like, perhaps that has a lot to do with how we keep manipulating the honeybee in this way. Like, it's not just one thing or another. It's this constant sort of flow of manipulation.
The flow hive.
Oh, the flow hive. So I'm really interested and intrigued by the flow hive. I actually saw a video just go through my feed the other day, and I think they're fascinating. I have heard good things actually from people in person. I think what I like about it is they're pretty, not that super invasive for folks who, first of all, for the person who wants to get honey from the hive, but also for the bees. I've heard it's pretty non-invasive. So I don't know.
I'm skeptical of it, but I don't know. I mean,
they're very expensive. So
yeah, that's true.
It's kind of picking the most expensive option to get started with. And here's what I'll tell you is that if it doesn't work, and your bees die, it's going to be even more disappointing. So I think my thought on the flow hive, although what I heard from somebody is that they went in with a few people and then split the cost, which, you know, always makes it easier. And then they split the honey when they get honey, which I think that's totally like, okay, then you're like, if there's a loss, it's not all on one person or another. So I think that is a good
and once
option.
you make the initial investment of the hive, you can always put more bees in. A package of bees, which is like 3 pounds of bees, is $85, like $90 now. Yeah,
it just depends
yeah.
on how good they do any given year. Where do you get bees? How much does it cost to get started? So we get bees from a variety of different places. We caught swarms before. We actually this week went and tried to catch some, extract some from somebody's house because they've moved into like crevice in their house and they need to get those removed. So we're trying to get those out.
That's kind of like advanced beekeeping.
That's and it's also not predictable. Like there's no guarantee that we'll get bees out of it. Some people I think are better at it than other people if they do it like all the time. But a lot of honey like gurus really try to catch swarms because it's the most inexpensive way. In fact, we had a swarm from one of our hives and we called our friend Wally and he came out to help us take care of it, but he got bees out of it. Like he came with a friend and they climbed to the top of like, it had to have been a 30-foot tree and got these bees down and took them home, but it was all for free. So he had a whole hive basically, and a thriving hive too, because when they're leaving, that means they're super healthy. They're growing, they're multiplying, and he got a good hive out of that, I'm sure.
But so in the area, there's a place called like Bees Needs. And if you just Google package of bees for sale and then whatever your city is, something will come up. And you guys are welcome to message us and we can point you in the right direction. But typically, like we said, so the package of bees, maybe on the high end is like $90. And then if you go a traditional hive, it's probably about $200. What did you say?
For the hive itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the time you get all the hive stuff.
Yeah, unless you're like super handy and you want to build everything from scratch, but then you're talking about time and materials, and you know, for us.
And we've done that way too.
Done that too. But I will say that when you buy the pre-made, usually they're dovetailed, and unless you're a great carpenter, you'll probably just nail together, and they didn't hold up as long as the ones that we paid for, you know, pre-made.
Yeah.
So now we started with Langstroth. We've sold off all that equipment. We have just a few hive bodies left from that. Because first of all, the downsides were, you know, we weren't like huge fans of that manipulation. We lost a lot of hives when we moved out to our acreage now. And that has to do with our neighbors spray Roundup like crazy. The bees do not thrive when they're pollinating a field full of Roundup. So we've lost a lot of hives since we've moved out here. In fact, we took a couple of years off of beekeeping because of that. And then
I actually just quit. I told Lacey I wasn't doing it anymore.
Okay, and then a couple of years ago, I said, I want bees. So we got a top bar hive, and a top bar hive is a totally different format. So it's more like, if you think about bees in the wild, they live in like a log or something, right? And they build in a like really narrow, closed off, totally sealed off compartment that's usually like round and enveloped. So tree, you know, like think about a bee tree, that's like a column, right? That's what they want. And then they'll build their comb around the outer edge and the comb will hang down. And that's what happens in a top bar hive. So a top bar hive is a very efficient way to build a hive because it's just one long body and then bars that are literally, there's nothing on them. They're just strips of wood that you put in there and they build the comb down from that. And it's really a cool thing to see because they build it in a very natural way and it comes down and curves down and around. Much like if you see comb in the wild. And a lot of times, you know, if you've seen where they've built comb in like a house or something, you'll see it just goes down and it makes like a rib of the comb, and it's really fun.
And because of that natural, I think they stay way healthier because they can build it the sizes they want. And different bee cells are different sizes depending on what they need. Like a cell for honey is a different size than a cell for like a male larvae egg, or, you know, so they can kind of manipulate as they go, knowing what their hive needs to survive.
Right. And that hive, though it has taken 2 years to really get full force, it's thriving this year. And we actually did take some honey from it. Now, on the flip side of that, last year we bought another top bar hive just to double up our bee yard and see if we could continue to grow. Because honestly, while I love getting honey, it's more important to me to know that we're contributing to the pollination on our property and just increasing the vitality in general on our property. And having honeybees around is just, it's like adding a layer of life to any property.
Yeah.
So we have these bees mainly for pollination, but if we get honey, it's kind of a bonus, right? Now, when you extract from a laying strip hive, the cool thing is they make spinners specifically for that. So you can take the frames with the comb on it, you slice off the top layer, uncover the honey, stick it in there, spin it, and all the honey comes out. And it's very convenient and manufacturing kind of like ready. Then with the top bar hive, you take out an entire frame with comb and honey on it. And you're going to take that whole, because there's no frame at all. You can't put it in anything. It's kind of like even if you flip it upside down, it could bend over and break. So we take it from that and we cut off the honeycomb. This last time we had some that we crushed and we let it drain, and that drained off. So it's just a little bit different of a process when it comes to collection. But then we got wax from it and the honeycomb from it and the honey too. So
and the honey's amazing. It's
really
like
good.
Nothing you buy at the store. It just tastes like the smell of our property. I don't know how to.
It really does.
Yeah.
In spring though, because we're hoping to go back out and get some more a little bit later, because the flow is actually just happening, and the flow is just when the nectar is on the flowers, when they're pollinating like crazy. And so nectar is, as these flowers open, and I think the tulip poplar around here is one of the most
most harvested.
Yeah.
It's like what the most comes from.
Yeah, prolific in terms of nectar for the bees. So they are getting the most nectar from the tulip poplars when those are open, and they haven't even opened yet. So we still have a long time until the end of the time when they're gathering nectar and making honey, which means you can take it from them then.
Antonio asked, how many bees do you need to get started? Probably 2 packages, Antonio. So like a package is 3 pounds. You have 2 options.
Mm-hmm.
One is a package of bees, which is literally just screened box with 3 pounds of bees in it. And the other option is what's called a nuke. So with a nuke, the bees build a few frames. It's like 5 frames. And then you can take that out and put it in a hive. I think that's the better way to go, but with nukes, they're more expensive. So it's kind of, you have to weigh it out. If I was going to
stronger because there are more bees. There's an established colony. They already know each other. When you get a package,
they already are like have their system down.
Yeah. When you get a package, it's a queen that's in her own little container, and then the bees around her, and they have never actually interacted before. And she has a little piece of candy that they eat through over the course of like a week or so. Yeah. And after they eat through that, then they're acclimated to one another. And that's the hope, is then, okay, now she's the official queen. But this queen is generally a queen that they've inseminated artificially. So there's a little bit more of, it seems almost a little more natural with a nuke, like a natural just expansion or growth or whatever.
So the downside though is that nukes have to be made each year. Mm-hmm. So if you get a nuke, it's usually after the honey flow has gone for this year, mm-hmm. or right at the beginning of it, and the bees don't build up enough for you to get honey this year. The package of bees, there's kind of a little bit more of a chance that you can get honey this year, because you get your package of bees much earlier. Like you can get a package of bees probably now if anybody still has them in stock. But generally you want to reserve your bees like in January to get them in the spring. Mm-hmm. So there's you kind of have to weigh it out. To me, I think if I was doing it, I might do a package of bees and a nuke. Most places have one or the other. Mm-hmm. So you can try both and see. But having 2 allows you to, if something happens to one, mm-hmm. you can take bees from one and put them in another, or, you get a little more, a few more variables than mm-hmm. if you just have one package of bees and something goes wrong, that's it for the year, mm-hmm. So,
yeah.
That's true.
Okay, we've got a few questions over here as well in the chat. Richard says, never done it, but I want to get them. You totally should. Just bought a home with some land and want to do, and we want a homestead. Totally do it and have bees pollinate and for honey. Yeah. So, I mean, you're on the total same page as us. So, Richard, I think you're right on the right path. And excuse me, I encourage you to just go ahead and try. I mean, I feel like, especially, I wish we had known about top bar hives when we first got started. They were sort of a new phenomenon, and we already had laying strip hives. We started there, but if you start with a top bar hive, they're much more affordable to get started with. I think there may be. Do you remember how much we paid for them?
I don't know. I don't know. I was thinking they're not that much cheaper.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, they're also much easier to make for yourself. There's lots
Yeah.
of plans, and you can make them far easier than making all the pieces because you don't have to buy frames, and you don't have to buy extruders, and there's lots of things you just don't have to buy.
Yeah, that's true. So basically, to get started, you need a smoker, a hive tool, and you'll see that. Just Google hive
Probably a
tool.
bee suit.
And a bee suit. At the very least, just something to cover, like a veil on your head. If the bees are nice, you won't get stung.
So a little known fact, I've never been stung by a honeybee.
I keep waiting for it.
Everyone's like, this is going to be the day.
Every time.
This is going to be the day.
Every time I know they're going to get her one of these days.
I never, in my whole life, not even before when we didn't keep bees.
Tomorrow, it's going to be tomorrow.
I've been stung
now.
by a yellow jacket. Yeah, no, now that I've said that, maybe I will. But there is definitely, like, you never want to, like, none of this. Those bees do not want to sting you if they don't have to because they will die. So they only do it in defense if they're feeling threatened. Now, when you start taking their honey, they start to get mad. And so you're going to have to, like, just be aware, like, get that honey out fast and move out of the way. But ultimately, like, they're just not aggressive. So I don't even get that nervous when I'm standing right in their flight path because the truth is they'll just fly around me most of the time. If they get stuck in me and they get upset, then they might, but for the most part, I do that pretty regularly to see how they're flying and look at their entrance and never have had much of an issue. So let's see,
So on the flip side, early on, I never wore a bee suit.
Really? I don't remember that.
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
And I went out to the hives one time, and I was wearing t-shirts and shorts, and I never really had problems. And I picked up the top of the hive, and the bees made this sound that was just like, now it's like this ungodly sound of like they were all like, zzz, like, and I was like, oh, something's not right. Happy. And by the time I thought to myself, oh, something's not right, my arms and legs were covered in bees stinging me.
Yeah.
And it ended up that the problem was they had lost their queen. And, like anybody else, you lose your queen, you get a little cranky.
I'm saying hi to people on here. Hey, Kelly. Hey, Jane. Hey, Ryan. Love you. Hey, Karen.
So
welcome. Hey, Josie. I'm trying to wave, but anyway, sorry.
A bee suit's a good idea to have.
Especially on your face.
Yeah.
Because they go for your face first.
And when you get stung in the face, like they like to sting me above my eyes because I generally guard my eyes when I didn't have a veil. Mm-hmm. And then the swelling comes down and it goes over your eye and your whole eye swells. But I will say, this is actually, people will say, oh, I'm allergic to bees. I could never keep bees.
Generally, you're not allergic to honeybees. It's not actually as common as people say. You're allergic to other kinds of bees, and wasps mainly, like yellow jackets. But people commonly think that honeybees and yellow jackets are the same thing, and they are not at all. But
still, if you're
allergic to them, I have been stung by a yellow jacket.
Take precautions.
I've also been stung by a carpenter bee, just never.
All right, what else do we have?
Week 2 into beekeeping. Awesome, Kim. Of course you are. My dad and brother keep bees as well. Yes. No, it's so nice to have just like one person who you can bounce things off of when you're first getting started.
And if you're in our group, totally post questions in there. We have a lot of other beekeepers in there too.
We do. Lots of beekeepers in there. And we don't claim to be experts, but we like to find answers for people, so ourselves included. So we will help you find answers. Richard is still streaming. Awesome. Thank you, Richard. Mostly interested in harvesting honey, of course, right? Winnie the Pooh Bear says the same thing. Anyone have experience with a flow hive? Okay, we answered that. Just making sure we're up to date.
What are the favorite flowers or foliage?
Yeah, so there's lots of bees, flowers, like flowers in general, bees love. You can plant like some perennials and they love those. They love the fruiting, the apple trees and the peach trees, and they will literally pollinate every single flower. We also love, bee balm. They love bee balm. Mm-hmm. They love, what else?
Well, the fun thing,
everything. Yeah,
what
were they all over last year?
The thing I was thinking that's fun is to start looking at, you can just Google it, like pollinating or flowers that bloom in like winter, flowers that bloom in spring and fall. Like start trying to grow plants so that you have flowers on your property all year long.
Red buds, they love
red buds.
Yeah. When the red bud was open, we would sit under the red bud and just be quiet, and you could just hear the bees all over the red bud. Yeah. It's really fun. Okay, what are your favorite flows or foliage? So this, okay. How much of a time investment? Okay, so I would say that the length strip is more time investment because there's like, again, all these pieces. I also think it's a little harder to manage. So it's something to keep in mind is that with a length strip hive, you have a deep body and you have a medium body. So the deep body is where like the majority of the hive will normally be. And then you put these supers on top that are more narrow. Now, these things, when they're full of honey, probably weigh, I don't know, what, 50 pounds?
They're heavy.
How much do you think?
Yeah.
So as you stack these up, their modular system, it seems easy, but when you're reaching above your head to pick off a top like super full of honey that's 50 pounds, that's really heavy and hard. So that's one thing I will say, just speaking from a woman's perspective, we don't always have a lot of upper body strength. So if you're doing this as a woman, a lady by yourself, you might want to think about always using the smaller hive bodies if you're going to go with a length strip, or really consider a top part hive because it's really, really very easy for anybody of any kind of agility level to deal with, because a length strip hive is a very bulky hive and very heavy to deal with.
I mean, again, like when you think about it from like a commercial setting, like they're picking these up with like forklifts and on pallets, and like it's just it's designed to be industrial. So
inefficient, for that purpose.
And there's other kinds of hives, and we can kind of start a discussion in the group about all the different kinds of hives. One of our friends, the Deans, I think they have like every kind of hive there is.
They
really.
do.
Yeah.
Well, that's how it was. So a warray hive is kind of nuts. It's cool. It's very much like a hollow log, but very hard to access and check on the bees. The thing is, when you have a healthy hive, there's not a lot of checking that you have to do. When they're healthy, you kind of know. And so with the top bar hive, we check on it like 4 times a year. I want to say we really do not.
Last year, you checked on it twice.
Yeah. So not very often. I look to see how they're coming in and out of the hive. If they're busy coming in and out of the hive, I know that's a good sign. We'll take off the lid. It's pretty invasive when you take off the lid and you start removing the comb. So we want to investigate at the beginning of the season. And since we know that they're thriving right now, we will check probably again in like 2 weeks to check on them and see if we should take out more, because the real risk right now is that hive is thriving so much, we likely will get a swarm. And if that's the case, we'll want to just mitigate the situation.
Okay, you got to back up. What's a swarm?
Okay, a swarm. A swarm is like a hive baby. It's like
it's how bees reproduce, really.
Naturally. It's a good thing. It means your hive is healthy. But what happens is they'll make another queen cell, and when you're looking in your hive, you'll see this long kind of tube shape, and that's where they're trying to rear a queen, and they're doing that because they're running out of room in their hive. And it's time to find more space and let half of the hive go or more. A lot of the hive will stay, but usually the stronger part of the hive leaves and finds another place. So we actually have set up some things around our property to try to catch swarms should they try to leave.
It's really a good sign, though. Like it's a sign of a healthy hive and reproduction, and like that. If you think about it like as in nature, like they're going out and forming another hive somewhere in the woods, like unfortunately you just can't keep it, and most of the bees leave, so your chances of honey that year are kind of low. So
could you just leave the top bar hive alone and have the bees for pollination? Totally.
Yeah.
Adele, that's really my take with the top bar and why I wanted the top bar. There's such minimal input needed. Yeah, exactly, Adele. And you and I, we're on the same page.
Yeah.
Lynette, is there a specific way to introduce the queen to the new nest after purchasing a nuke or a batch? So if you're getting a box of bees, it comes with a queen in it, like ready, and so when you open that package, they will automatically open that queen like over time, and they'll automatically, that's how they build it to be introduced to one another. So you don't have to get a separate queen. Now there is a such thing as a requeening, which happens when you look in your hive and you see that there's no queen, and that can often happen after a swarm. I'm not really sure when else that would happen. Just she randomly dies.
Yeah, the queen can just die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But usually if that happens, I think they'll replenish and make another queen before she dies. But she's the only one that lays eggs. So you have one queen, she lays all the eggs, and no one else lays eggs. So if she dies, there's not a backup plan if they haven't prepared for that. So there are some instances where people will kill the queen because they don't think that she's doing a good job, and then requeen it. And there's a lot like genetic wise that people want an Italian queen, or they want, this and that queen because of different characteristics of those kinds of bees. But again, I think that, if you're giving them this, like, as much of a natural environment as you possibly can. Of course, we've seen, there will be pests in there. Like, we'll see roaches in there. We'll see maybe even hive beetle occasionally. They can manage a specific amount of pests. Now, when you start seeing those things take over, you'll see that that's because they're a very weak hive. It's just like an immune system. A human who has a weak immune system, anytime they're exposed to anything, they're going to get it, right? But most humans who have a healthy immune system can fight off those different pests. So there are some things that we can use to help them build their immune system, and that's going to be like protein. You can feed them certain herbs. Thyme is a really good thing for bees. Chamomile is a really good thing for bees. You can make special concoctions. You can use essential oils to help.
Same thing for health.
For health, for health and just to encourage their vitality. So there's lots of things you can do, but ultimately a healthy hive will fight off those pests pretty well.
And sometimes you end up with genetics that are just bad, and it's like animal husbandry, like sometimes you just have to let that hive go so that you can get healthier genetics.
Is there a specific way? Oh, we already answered that. I felt like we missed a question, but I don't think we did.
I think we're getting out of time. If you got any other questions,
let's look at that sheet really quick of questions and just see if there's anything that we missed. You guys, I'm loving talking to you about this. If you have any other questions, please share them. How time consuming is beekeeping? It really is up to you. You have to decide. A Langstroth hive, you really have to get into it, especially this time of year, probably once a month minimum. And that can take a while. It can take, depending, if you have one hive, it can take an hour to check a hive. It depends on how busy it is. It depends on how busy it is. It depends on what you're doing. If you're extracting honey, then it's going to take longer than if you're just checking on them. It is expensive to get started, depending on your thoughts on what's expensive and what's not. But I would say you want to plan for about $400 if you're just getting started with no hive or equipment or anything like that. At least $400.
You can also sometimes score used equipment, so you can look around and see.
That is totally true. Yes, you're welcome, Richard. I'm so glad you hopped on. Let's see. Beekeeping a difficult thing to do, and does it take a lot of? Yeah, a good question. It totally can be as simple or as easy as you want. It's totally like sort of what you make of it. Like, how intensive is beekeeping? And there's kind of like different levels. It depends on your goals with the beekeeping. If you really just want pollinators, which I think is a very valuable thing this day and age, we want to help the bee population as much as possible. We want to increase the, good genetics. We want to pollinate. That's good for our ecosystem. Then that's a valid reason to get started. And honestly, you need minimal equipment for that too. You might not even need a bee suit. If you're just going to do a top bar hive for pollination, then I don't know that
you probably at least want something to protect your face.
Right. Like you said earlier. I agree.
You can risk it. I did for a while.
I think the hardest part of getting started, that was somebody's question, is probably like the same thing it is with everything else. Fear.
Right.
Doing it in spite of feeling like you don't know all that you need to know. The truth is you will figure it out as you go. You don't have to have all the answers before you get started. There are some great books that you can have that can help you along the way. I have a top bar beekeeping book that I really like, and I'll reference that pretty frequently. But I'll tell you that even though there's visual aids in there, I don't learn until I'm at the hive and I'm like, okay, I don't want to keep honey at the entrance. I want to make it, so they can get in and out easier. Like, there's just, when you start to do it, you start to understand some of the concepts way more than you could ever get them out of a book and understand.
And I think the thing to remember is, like, even if you buy them in a package, they're still wild animals, and they will, unless you do something horribly wrong, they'll make it work. Nature just has a way of making things work. So, you can just get started, try it. And if you have problems, let us know and we'll help you troubleshoot it. But you can do it. I don't know. We did it. So anybody can do it.
Yeah. And there is actually the book that we got, and we still have it, I think, is Beekeepers for Dummies. It's like the best getting started book, especially if you're going to do a Langstroth. I'm not sure there's much about top bar hives in there, But it was actually, that was the go-to book. It was the top recommended. It was better than all the rest. So if you're looking for,
and again, like on the internet, I will say, like, since we're talking resources on the internet, you're going to find, like, it's funny because, like, in the Jewish world, they say, like, if you ask a rabbi a question, you'll get like 3 answers. It's the same thing for like beekeeping, you know, like if you ask a beekeeper, everybody has their own opinion. They're very passionate about it, and their answer is the most right answer. But you will find every aspect to every answer. So it's kind of like, for me, my new mindset is, like I said, they're wild creatures. How can we replicate nature as much as possible for them? And that's where I think they'll thrive. So you just, yeah.
Okay, so somebody did ask, and I think probably Adele, what's the time commitment? We already talked about that.
Yeah.
Can you do it alone? We talked about that. But she mentions kids, and I do want to say that our kids have bee suits, and they like to go out and look in the hive pretty often too. And it is such a good experience for them that I would encourage you to include your kids on this too, because what better way for them to learn about nature and, you know, just being a part of those processes. And I mean, we have honey all the time. We've even gotten honey from other beekeepers that we love, and it's always delicious. But when we took that comb and that honey out of the hive a week ago, my 11-year-old she would just walk past it and she'd be like, I might cry. She'd just be like, that came from our bees.
Yeah.
It's just a really powerful experience to be able to do something like that with your kids and to have them experience. It's just a powerful thing.
You know, with that being said, with kids, like, when you set up your hive for yourself and for your kids, like, really plan where your hive is going to be as far as like the flight path. So the flight path is like when they come out of the hive, they just go straight. You can kind of like cheat it though, and like give them like 3 feet and then put up like a straw fence or something to make them come out and go up. Because ultimately they're coming out and they're orienting themselves on the sun, and then they're going where they want. So if you have limited space, you can put them somewhere where they're going to be forced to get out of your way.
Richard asks, how close or far away do you feel like it's okay to keep bees from your home? So that he answered. I will say, with our first house where we kept bees, we had less than 1/4 of an acre, and we had sort of a back pocket. There was a fence, and it was behind a little like attached closet, and they were just behind that. And then you want them to face south, right?
South or east.
Southeast is either way. Although I will tell you that our bees in the hive that we're in, even though we face them one direction, they've changed where they come out of the hive, because they'll find a crack and they'll be like, this is our new entrance. Or on the top of our hive, there's actually an entrance on one side and then there's an entrance on the other, and they've gone back and forth between which of those entrances they use, and they'll like seal off the entrance they're not using, or they'll open it up, and it's totally up to them.
If you're in the southeast, I think it's okay. Like North Carolina, where we are, the summers get really hot. So I think them having some shade is nice. There's other beekeepers that will say put them in full sun and none of the other pests will live and it'll make their hive healthier. But again,
it
like,
could add some stress.
Yeah, I think it might add some stress to the bees. You know, I don't know. And then facing east or southeast, they do that because the sun rises right into their hive entrance, which wakes them up earlier, which gets them going. That's the theory behind it. So, I mean, you know, I don't know that like ours, the entrance that they prefer now is like northwest.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't know that there's a lot of
I think they come
that.
out like in the direction they want to fly. Like, that's the way they go too. They head exactly that direction.
Yeah.
So whatever they're pollinating is over that way. I will say too, with kids, like a lot of it is going to be about you talking to your kids and saying like, this is what you do when you're around the bees. But what, like we said before, the bees are not aggressive. So I am far more worried about yellow jackets and wasps and other stinging things, snakes on our property, than I am worried about bees. And that was true even when we lived in the city. Like they just, it was never really an issue. If you give the hive even just a 15-foot radius to not be close to, then it was never an issue.
We actually took, when we had like toddlers, we actually got one of those like bamboo fence things and just put it, I think it was like 3 feet from the entrance of the hive.
So they came out and went like
and just put it across there, and it kind of helped the kids like at that age, you know, toddler age. We didn't want them. I mean, it was like right off our back patio.
Dogs are another thing that you might want to be careful about too.
Dogs will learn pretty quick.
They will. But anyway, I hope that all is very helpful. I think that's enough information, right? We've gone well over 30 minutes.
Yeah. So if you got any other questions, the schoolhouselife.com.
Please join us there if you're not there already. We're loving our community there and getting very inspired to share all the little things that we're doing.
Yeah.
And hear from you guys about what you're doing too, because like we always tend to believe we're better together. Lynette,
Thanks,
thank
Lynette.
you. Great info. Yay, good.
Okay. All right, guys.
Have a great night.
Bye.